Sometimes we're so focused on the outcome that we forget the purpose. We forget the destination that we were originally on. There's this quote from it's from when George St. Pierre, my GOAT personally, of the MMA community and the UFC, and he's coaching this tough team, and he brings on another coach. I forget exactly what the other coach was there for, but he was kind of mentoring them and kind of giving them a speech a little bit. And he said something along the lines of this. He said, "There's not only an option for victory, but there's also an option for a beautiful victory." Maybe you're dealing with a situation right now, and I'll use myself as an example. Not because I want to make this about me. One night I was working as a CO for a jail. Inmate comes up to me and he says, "Man, I'm kind of arguing with this inmate, right?" And it kind of divulges into insults, as it usually does in a jail or any correctional facility. He says, "Man, it must be your first day. It must be your first week. You must be new, huh?" See, the low-hanging fruit, the victory at hand would be to say, "No, actually, I've been here for a little bit. You're wrong and I'm right." When in reality, the more beautiful side of the victory would be to go at the root cause of it, to really call them out on the lack of respect. So "Hey man, you gotta just have a little bit of respect. There's no need for that." And really, when doing that, that's kind of like an act of courage. It's an act of courage, and the other inmates would be able to see that. And the reason why that's a beautiful victory is because you didn't pick the low-hanging fruit. You chose the road less traveled by, and therefore you got more backing for it. Ultimately, behind those walls, that's what really runs the facilities, is respect for one another. And especially as a correctional officer, I'm not saying I'm this huge, I'm this correctional officer with this long-winded career, because if I'm going to be honest, it wasn't long-winded at all. It was very short-lived, and I actually wasn't very good at it either. But I did learn quite a lot from it. And the inmates, they really did respect when you didn't choose the low-hanging fruit. You didn't choose the victory that was so easy and that was so in sight, but instead you chose a more beautiful victory. You really didn't tug on the vine, but you pulled it out by the roots. You found the root cause of it, and that's more of a long-lasting victory. That's a victory with more of a legacy. The one that's a beautiful victory. The one that's bigger than you, that's bigger than yourself, that's bigger than everything that you're dealing with right now. That's something that would earn you respect in a facility like that for a lot longer than just picking up the low-hanging fruit and calling them out and saying, "No, actually, you're wrong. I have been working here for longer than a week. So you're wrong, I'm right, I win." Sometimes it is hard. Sometimes you don't get the beautiful victory that you were looking for. But that idea is that it's there, that it's optional. Win, lose, or draw, you'll get the satisfaction that you're looking for. Whether or not you actually do get the beautiful victory, it doesn't matter. It's the idea that you reached for something bigger than yourself. It's the idea that you had courage, and you reached past the ceiling of what you thought your limitations were. It might not even be something as intense as being a CO for a facility, for a detention facility. It can be maybe you're working customer service. Maybe you're working the customer service counter, and someone's giving you a lot of, and someone might be giving you a lot of lip. Someone might be giving you a lot of mouth. And they say "Hey, I was just here, and this isn't how it seems." No, but you very well could say "No, sir," or "Ma'am, that's actually not true, and here's the evidence." But instead, you can really get at the root cause. You can win a beautiful victory. You can go for the beautiful victory. You say "Well, I understand that you're frustrated and all that, but there's no need for all this disrespect. Hear me out from my side. I'm just here working for customer service. I'm just here doing my job. It's during the summer, it's during the Black Friday or whatever. You can really get at the root cause of it And instead of just winning the moment, you can win it all. You can win it all. You can win it all, and you can have a lasting legacy with that. I know some people would probably already say that, well, enough small victories win, then you win the war. But even if you win the war, how do you know there's not going to be another war that starts? How do you know that the war that you won is going to have a legacy left behind? Because ultimately, that's really what matters. It doesn't matter what you have while you're alive. It matters what you have when you're gone, what you leave behind you when you're gone. No matter how big or small you think the moment is, but to really just live each moment like it's your last. So even as, from when I started in like the guard industry, I was just lowly security guard for a hospital. But, I took it with stride. I had a very strong passion for my job. I was very passionate about being the one that went into a dangerous situation first. I was very passionate about the nurses, medical staff, safety. I was very passionate about a lot of things, even as a lowly security guard. I heard a quote from some very controversial figures. It's the Tate brothers. I think it was Tristan Tate. And I know not everyone agrees with him, but you don't have to agree with him to hear this out. That it's not about the suit on the man. It's about the man in the suit that makes the whole figure. With that being said, it's not about what you have, but it's about your character. Your character means everything. Your character can move mountains. Your character is what really motivates people. Like you have a lot of people, like myself, that kind of got like this gym body that they got, and I'm guilty of this too, where you get in the gym and like your gym is your everything, but then you have a lack of character development. You have a lack of overall character, and instead of being able to motivate people, you just look like this. I see this all the time, especially on Instagram. Like a lot of people my age, they would tap into these like sort of alter egos, in the gym, especially on Instagram. Instead of letting their character speak, instead of letting what is be, they try to make it about themselves. And I think that's what makes it look so cringe and so unappealing. And like now you got all these sort of cringe influencers and like the Zoomer market on the fitness industry and social media, who try to really make it about themselves. They try to make it about themselves, and that's not a beautiful victory. That's the low-hanging fruit, is just making it about themselves. The most beautiful life stories, the most beautiful biographies of influential people that have really set a legacy isn't spoken about themselves. It's spoken about other people. It's other people that talk about him because that character is so influential. Take Jesus, for example. Jesus never bragged about all of these miracles that he was doing. Jesus never bragged about any of that. And look at his legacy. Still talked about 2,000 years later. With that being said, I feel like you just have to stop making it about yourself. You have to stop making it about yourself, and you gotta look at the bigger picture. You gotta reach for something that's bigger than you. It's bigger than all of this around you. You can't just settle for the victory. Because the victory would be nice. The victory will get you a good night's rest, but a beautiful victory will get you a legacy. All right. And I think that's all I got to say. All right. God bless.